Is it showing up?
It still says waiting for you on the.
There's no new one.
Yeah, I don't know.
Damn it! What the hell?
It has a totally different. It has a totally different background too.
Yeah,
On the new one. Are you
we're
in the
live.
Right? Well, I don't know where we're live on. This is going to be a very embarrassing video if this ever goes anywhere. Oh wait, okay, hold on. Something new just popped up on my phone. Okay,
YouTube.
we're on. It's on. It's on. Yeah,
we are live. We're going.
We are live. We are live. Yeah, I don't want to have the echo there. You know.
And we're back.
Yeah.
What a pain in the ass.
Hey,
Okay.
I mean, it happens even to Elon Musk. So come on.
Dude, you know what? That's a great point. That's a great point, dude. Well,
Although
you know what? We had such a.
We didn't crash it from having over 1 million people watching, though. Unfortunately.
No, we crashed it from StreamYard goofy bullshit. Let me fix something real quick. Psycho 1 through 4 is live. Pass, Psycho, delete, and then fuck. Okay. Sorry guys. Technical problems. I'm sorry, I got my whole dashboard.
Everything's
up here.
Just downhill from here now.
It's all bad. This is fucked.
It's a bad omen.
I know. Oh no. Okay. Well, sorry guys for the craziness of that. I'm going to delete the former Psycho. We're now live here, just so no one gets confused. Thank you for sticking with us on this. Sorry, we're 10 minutes late. No viewers in the chat.
Everybody bailed because they're like...
Everyone bailed. They were like, what a mess. These
can't
fucking
get their
guys.
act together.
Yeah, first of all, they don't.
This,
Yeah, first off, they haven't done a stream in like a month, and now this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just getting my bearings here.
1,000 pardons, everyone.
1,000 pardons. Exactly. So, hey, my question to you was, first of all, I had a great intro for the last one that nobody watched because it didn't happen. But I guess my question for you to start out, this is a tough one to do. This is a series that I would never have thought to do. It was your idea. Because, of course, I'm an admirer from sort of an academic perspective of the original Psycho as a seminal film in the oeuvre of Alfred Hitchcock. And I guess I just assumed that if there were any sequels, they would be sort of like cheap cash grabs. That would be a massive come down from the original. And how could you possibly make a sequel to Psycho? What would it be about? But in this episode, we not only watched Alfred Hitchcock's original, but we both read the Robert Bloch novel and watched the sequel movies and the remake.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, Ryan, the question I would ask you to get us back into the groove here on this stream, sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody, to start out, but why did you decide to, why Psycho?
Well, I've always been a fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and Psycho especially. I always think of this as one of the movies that I saw at a young age that got me into classic films more so than others. It's kind of tangentially I associated with the Universal monsters and all that. So stuff that I saw at an early age that piqued my interest and said, hey, there's a lot of great material out there that's from, time long before we were born. And so this kind of guided me along the path of my journey into exploring, film history and all that. So I was enthralled with Psycho for a long time. And then I remember when I first read about that there were sequels, and I was kind of, fascinated that what would they possibly do in a sequel to Psycho? I mean, it's an encapsulated film. Hitchcock had been dead by the time they made it. And it's just kind of curiosity that was out there. And it took me a while to see them. I didn't see them until probably I was in high school or college. And I was like, oh, they're pretty good. I actually avoided Psycho 4 for a long, long time until the purposes of watching this video, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just was... it came in the pack. I bought the DVD originally years ago. I bought the DVD pack that had the Psycho 2, 3, and 4 in it. And I watched 2 and 3, liked them a lot. And Psycho 4, I was like, well, I just don't really like prequels. I don't know. There's not a whole lot there that's left to explore for this world, for this character that we really need to see the origin story when it's been laid out so many times. But so there's that. And the remake, I guess we should also put a little note on that. I actually remember going to see that in the movie theater back in the day. I was a little kid, but my parents took me to see that, and it probably left a mark on my psyche at that point too. So Psycho's been with me for the whole time, and I'm glad we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, same. I guess we should just jump right in and talk about the original Psycho film, which is not one that I had. I think I saw it in high school. I was a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan because I was enamored with the glamour and sort of like pageantry of North by Northwest and Rear Window and Vertigo. Those were films that I have very fond memories watching on sunny afternoons as a child with my mom on TCM. And Psycho was not one that I had seen. I guess it's one of those movies that you feel like you have seen, even if you haven't, because that shower scene is so iconic. And there's a lot more to it. I guess I would start by asking you this. Everybody knows Psycho is a classic, that it's a great film, that it pushed the boundaries of what you could show in the modern cinema of 1960. And that Alfred Hitchcock shot it on a very low budget because it was such sort of scandalous material based on Robert Bloch's book. He used his Alfred Hitchcock Presents television crew to make the movie. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone loves it. It's a classic. It broke barriers. What I'm going to start with this and we can move into other things, but what are some faults you find in the original Psycho, if any?
I don't think there are a lot. I think one of them and this is one that I remember that Siskel and Ebert even talked about back in the day, the psychiatrist scene at the end of the movie feels unnecessarily tacked on as an explanation that we don't need. Mm-hmm. But looking back in retrospect, I think for 1960, that psychiatry explanation was needed for people to understand. I feel like if the movie had been newly made nowadays, people would have a better understanding of the psychosis of how complex a character this is, but that does feel a little bit tacked on. Otherwise, not really. I really don't see any major flaws. There's nothing that I watch when I watch it again. I'm like, oh, can we get past this part? Can we not? Can we move on to something else? You're kind of, at least I am. I'm enthralled with the movie from the moment the opening credits start rolling, and we hear the Bernard Herrmann music, the score, with that incredible opening title sequence with the horizontal lines flying in and out of the screen with the titles, with the credits. Yeah, mm-hmm. It's unlike anything that I had ever seen before when I first saw it, and I was just immediately, captivated by it. But I wanted to say before that, the production of this movie is also quite fascinating. I mean, if you think about it, would you not say this is Alfred Hitchcock at his peak? That he never achieved anything quite like this level of artistic or commercial success afterwards. I mean, he was riding very high off of North by Northwest, which had come out before this, and on a string of just masterpiece after masterpiece, right? Talking about, all through the 50s, almost everything that he did in the 50s was gold, save for The Trouble with Harry, or The Wrong Man. And
which people really do like, except us.
The Wrong Man?
Yeah. The Wrong Man's weak.
It's not bad, but it's experimentation, and I don't think it's quite up to snuff. But
I agree with Cobra Malibu. Frenzy is a banger, and I also like Topaz. And in my new movie that I've been working on, you'll find a reference to Topaz in there.
Oh yeah, no, I love Topaz. And Torn Curtain, I'm quite fond of as well. But I don't think you can say that Torn Curtain or Topaz or Frenzy, and Family Plot is also quite good too, which I just watched last week.
Reference to Family Plot. Sorry, that's the one with
Karen Black.
Karen Black.
Family Plot and William Devane, also quite good in that movie.
I have a Family Plot Karen Black reference in my movie, but go ahead.
Yes, the none of those movies are anywhere close to the output that he had in the 1950s and ending with
True.
Psycho, which is ostensibly a 50s movie that came out in 1960, right? I mean, has many of the same sensibilities. And he was almost basically 60 years old at this point, and he was being told by Hollywood that, you know, or critics or audiences that, hey, you're making these great movies, but you're also benefiting from having these outlandishly lavish budgets from major studios. You're having the top tier actors of the time. What else can you do? And he made Psycho almost just to prove a point and to kind of get some kind of artistic integrity here, to make a movie that would be otherwise considered like gutter trash. This movie, this book, Psycho, Robert Bloch, is absolute garbage, you know, by the standards of that time period. This is not considered to the level of someone like Alfred Hitchcock or to be made by a major studio. And he says, well, what if somebody really good made this movie? And I think also he was quite upset that he had not been able to make Diabolique, which is what he wanted to do originally. And
he wanted to do a remake of Diabolique.
What's that?
He wanted to do a remake of Diabolique?
No. He wanted to adapt the book that Diabolique was based on, but he was not able to obtain the rights, and it was made instead in France.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes, okay. He was interested in making that book adaptation, but he's not able to secure
I did
the
not
rights.
know that. Okay,
and so that kind of miffed him, and so this was his answer to that. And also, he had to basically finance this movie mostly on his own because the studio did not want to be, you know, tied to this trashy movie.
Well,
so it was a lot of risk involved.
Because, you know, people speak of Diabolique and Psycho in the same breath. I had never made the connection that Diabolique was material he wanted to adapt but you think about the scene of the disposing of the body by the two women in Diabolique, how similar it is to Norman Bates disposing of the body in Psycho. How it's a very long, drawn out sequence that draws your, I guess, your sympathy to the murderer, right?
Mm-hmm.
He can't help it. And Hitchcock has done that before where he couldn't help but draw your sympathy to the murderer. Like, I think to a certain degree, maybe Rear Window, but especially in Dial M for Murder.
Oh, yeah.
But I did not know that. So, you know, when I was reading the book, we both read the book by Robert Bloch, which was published in, I think, 1958. And maybe this is just sort of a knock on my non-familiarity with fiction of the early 20th century, but I was shocked at how graphic the book was for a novel of that time. And that this would even be considered by Alfred Hitchcock as something to do. Now, unfortunately, I mean, not unfortunately, but I mean, sort of interestingly, this has become maybe his most famous movie, right? For the general public, his glamorous adventure films sort of blend together, I guess. But this one is a very indelible movie. And so for good reason.
It's so unique even among his own filmography. That's probably why too. That's
exactly right. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about you find fault in the idea of the explanation at the end, which I think is correct. I mean, that is the one that lands flat with modern audiences. This is a question I've been asking myself recently. One of my next videos I'm writing a script for is David Cronenberg's Videodrome, which features sequences of sort of BDSM style sex with Debbie Harry's character, right? And that's something that the audiences now are like tangentially familiar with, that this sort of practice exists. But like, how on the radar of the average viewer would that have been in the 80s? And I suppose for this too, I mean, how many people when watching Psycho had ever heard the term transvestite in 1960?
Probably very few. The only other major reference or movie would have been Ed Wood's Glen or Glenda. That's like a total trash movie about
Some Like It Hot. I mean, yeah.
What's that?
Some Like It Hot. I mean,
oh yeah, Some Like It Hot. But that's different though, because they're not doing it to achieve like a sexual pleasure or fetish. They're doing it to escape from the mob. And certainly characters, even in cartoons dating back to the Golden Age, have dressed in drag. Bugs Bunny, Fred and Barney on the Flintstones have done that for whatever comedic situation they've been in.
I'm
but
going to read
not
this
to
real
the
quick.
degree that Ed Wood did in Glenn or Glenda, or Norman Bates in Psycho, where it's a much deeper psychiatric problem.
I'm going to read Matthew's quote real quick. He said, "I bet Alfred Hitchcock loved the freedom, or I'll add, or was perhaps envious of the freedom that novelists had at the time to be so explicit versus all the limitations in film." I think that's probably correct, but then you have to look at when Alfred Hitchcock was trying to go toe-to-toe with some of the more hard-edged stuff in the early 70s. He kind of fell flat,
Yeah.
or kind of came across as clumsy, like he didn't know what to do. He was a better creeper and suggester than he was an outright explicit portrayer of violence or sex. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Yes. But you were saying about the violence in the Block novel, and it's really apparent.
Well,
I mean, shower scene, literally Marion gets decapitated.
It gets her head cut off. I remember that was shocking to me when I read that. Yeah. You know, I would say not just the violence in the book, but the sort of inner monologue between Mother and Norman, I thought was fairly explicit. And also interesting in the book too, we can get to Anthony Perkins, but Norman Bates is drawn up as a much more like disgusting character. Like there are references to him being like fat or bald or old and gross, right?
Yes.
He's not this sort of like androgynous figure that Norman Bates is, right? This sort of Norman Bates is in a way a sort of overgrown mama's boy, but like in a, he's like a very old, like a boy. He's like a boy, right?
Yes.
He's not like a creepy old, like, weirdo, which I think also sells the idea that he's able to captivate Marion Crane in conversation for so long. And maybe what's more interesting about him is that he does seem sort of somewhat accessible, which is the only reason why the sequels work, because he does elicit some sympathy from you. If you had old, fat, balding, comb over, glasses Norman Bates, I don't think the sequel plot for part 2 would have worked. But
no, not at all. And none of I don't think the movie would work if it had not been changed to portray Norman Bates as, like Anthony Perkins is the boy next door, this handsome, strapping young man who, kind of a slender guy, but still he's very charming. He's definitely odd. He's definitely odd and strange, but not in a way that is off-putting. If you saw this person on the street, or you went to that motel and you met this guy in the office, you would not be, maybe your spider sense would go off and you say, it's a little off. There's something not quite right here, but he's probably not probably not a scary guy, not someone that's going to kill me.
I think actually, I think actually he's a character that red flags would go off more for men than women. For women, this is like a poor, sad, weak, frail, mild-mannered guy. For men, this sort of like, okay, this guy's like a total wimp, and you know what wimps can be capable of sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think you see that as how weird he is when they start talking, and right off the bat, you see all the stuffed birds, and the guy's into taxidermy, which is not a usual hobby, even by any standard, right? That's kind of a very strange thing to be into, where you're constantly playing with the dead, you're stuffing dead birds. It's a very morbid hobby.
I'm from the Midwest. It's a little different, but go ahead.
Is it? Okay, down in Florida, it's not really a thing. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anybody that does taxidermy, but getting your hunting trophy stuffed is not an absurd.
Do you do it yourself though?
No one never does it themselves.
Okay.
But there's always a guy. And then when you get it done, it's quite the trophy to show off and say, check out my deer, check out my pheasant. Right?
But if you recall, Norman does not stuff beasts because he cannot stand the sight of stuffed beasts. He only likes birds that are stuffed, which is a little nod to your reference there. Perhaps then maybe taxidermy was looked at a different light in that regard. But that's that part.
I'll chime in the chat here. Trembling Colors it catches my drift and says men would see him as a creep that is up to something, and women would see him as a cute weirdo they can fix. I think that's exactly correct. And I think that goes both ways. I think there are sort of weirdo characteristics in men that sends off alarm bells in women's minds that men don't pick up, and vice versa. So
But do you think if they had kept the idea of, and maybe Vince Vaughn in the remake, excuse me,
Yeah.
fulfills the notion that Robert Bloch put more in the book for Norman as kind of a different personality for Norman. Do you think that works better, or do you think it worked better by having? I think it was Joseph Stefano who made the idea to change Norman into this character the way we see him in the original Psycho.
Sorry, Cobra says Norman is a proto Sigma male. That's funny. But I think you're right. I don't want to get too into the remake until we get to it. Give the
No,
some
sure,
red
but
meat for people. But I think that Norman Bates, Vince Vaughn conversation is much more similar to the book than Hitchcock's version, where he sort of has like this outburst, which is sort of a big red flag that we also see Anne Heche react to in a very different way than Jimmy. What's her name?
Janet Leigh.
Janet Leigh. Yeah.
Yeah. Janet, do you notice one scene that always bothers me, and not that it bothers me, but it's just a very strange curiosity, is when they're meeting at the motel for the first time and he brings her the tray for dinner. She invites him into the room, and it's a very subtle kind of like, hey, here you go, you're bringing me dinner, you're gonna come in. But it's very odd because Marion is not written in that way in any other regard that she would be, willing to spend
Sexual?
the night with this guy. Yes, she's clearly devoted to John Gavin. The whole point.
I don't agree with that.
You don't think so? I think she's very devoted. She's willing to steal $40,000 for him, basically, so they can run away together. I don't see her as the kind of character that would be willing to have a one-night stand with this creepy guy at a motel.
I would disagree with you. I think that Marion Crane in the first film is a very sexually and ambitiously driven energy style person. And I think she stole the money more to spite her boss and the sort of Texas money man that walks into the office, and to stick it to the system that's kept her sort of in a bind in this shitty job, in the situation she's in, than to pay the debts. Because she didn't think it through. I mean, how are you going to pay? I mean, maybe you could pay off debts with a wad of cash back in 1960. It wouldn't work today. But I think that it was something that was more driven by like, you know what? It's time to get mine, and I'm going to go. She didn't have a really well thought out plan. It was an impulsive move.
Well, that's the point, right? We all go a little mad sometimes.
Yeah, and she did. And
that's when she kind of snaps out of it and says, "Whoa, what did I do?
What have I done?" It's like post-coital, what do they call that? Like there's a more crude term for it. The chat can fill it in there. But post something clarity, I think is what it's called.
So to get back to the idea of Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, I always think about it in this way: is that Psycho's about the monster that's within us that we conceal from the outside world, right? So we see this in Norman Bates. He's living a double life, and I think it's pretty relevant, especially for Anthony Perkins, who you can claim was also living a double life at that time as a closeted gay man. That's also something that probably spoke to him in this role, is that you have to hide yourself from the world. And it lashed out in a bad way here.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Hitchcock was also a guy that there's sort of, I seem to go after this sort of homosexual subtext in every movie we watch, and because it's kind of low hanging fruit. But at the same time, Hitchcock, as a British man, I think is much more in tune to homosexuality than we are in America, at least back then. There's more of a tradition of it over there, especially with the boarding school culture. And he oftentimes casted closeted gay men in sort of murder roles. Rope, his work with John Dahl, the same guy from Rope that was in Strangers on a Train. I think he directed, who's the henchman from North by Northwest?
I don't remember.
He
definitely Montgomery Clift in I Confess. Also,
absolutely, yes.
Protagonist, though.
Yeah, I think this was an element that Hitchcock latched onto and realized was effective. I mean, did he know that Anthony Perkins was gay? I'm not sure. I mean, Anthony Perkins was sort of gay to an extent. He's had a son who played him in Psycho 2, and also is the director of Longlegs, the hit horror film of this year.
Did you see that?
But not yet. No, I haven't seen it. Sorry. Yeah.
Very bizarre, very strange movie. Please see it.
I'm interested in seeing it. Yeah, I want to see it, but I can't bring my wife to it. You told me I can't bring my wife to it.
It's so weird, man. It's just so weird. Nicolas Cage is out of his mind in that movie. I don't know if it's meant to be farcical or not at a certain extent, but we don't want to get too off topic. Oh yeah,
but yeah. I mean,
rope is basically a metaphor for that for
absolutely
homosexuality. Yeah,
and I mean, like, so Hitchcock had to be keyed into that to some extent, right? I mean, he had to get it in a way that other American directors didn't, right?
Yeah,
and know there was something to tap in there in mind. With Norman Bates. But I think the thing about Psycho for me is that you talk a lot about, I've heard in the chat and from you, that Psycho is a story about like presenting one face and there's something hidden behind it, right?
Yes.
What that implies, I'm not sure. Is that about how we perform under capitalism per se, you know, in this sort of society? Because I think the interesting thing about Psycho is just how unglamorous it is. Phoenix of 1960 is not a glamorous place to be. The overhead shot and push in to the hotel room is not like Paris of, like, you know, To Catch a Thief. It's not Mount Rushmore. You know what I mean? It's a very dingy, dirty place. The film takes place on the road at a used car, you know, stop at a shitty motel. I mean, it's sort of like the underbelly of America, which coincidentally, I mean, unexpectedly seems glamorous to us now because it's nostalgic. But at the time, this would have been very dirty, dingy material. And I think that's also what adds to the creep factor, and something that in a book I read by David Thompson, he touches on more than anything else, is the atmosphere of the open road, of like these sort of bric-a-brac, shitty constructed places, right? You know what I'm saying? This sort of
I mean, and also just think about in terms of isolation. There's no cell phones. There's no modern means of communication. She's isolated and she's stranded at this motel, basically, more or less. And it's not a nice place to be. There's no overt threat of harm. And in fact, what's kind of ironic that she spends one night in her car sleeping on the side of the road, and the policeman comes over and you know, questions her about that and says, well, wouldn't it have been better if you'd pulled over into a motel and spent the night there? You know, because that would be much safer than staying on the side of the road. And of course, it's literally quite the opposite. It's also about like the fact that she ends up at this dingy, dirty motel, and you know, you ultimately meet your death there at this, in the shower, in one of the most worst, but the worst dump on earth is where you spend your last moments being ripped to shreds by this, you know, psychopathic killer.
And that's one thing I wanted to point out too, is I don't want to hear from anybody that the Psycho murder of Janet Leigh doesn't hit hard anymore because it's not gory enough. I mean, like it's such a disturbing scene, even for a film that's 60 years old. I mean, it's beyond disturbing because we meet a character with agency, with goals, with aspirations for life, with, you know, pleasures and wants and desires. And this person is just cut down in the most unceremonious and brutal way possible, left to die in a shitty motel.
Yep.
And
her body disposed of in the most,
in a swamp.
Worse than, yes, you're buried in the swamp, wrapped in a shower curtain in your car. So even afterwards, you're humiliated, even after death.
Oh, it's terrible. It's brutal. It's horrible. It's
and for
very
what?
sad.
For stealing money, which is bad. No, we're not defending that, but like, you know, was that worth it? Was that worth her dying over for being murdered? You know, she didn't deserve it.
That's such a fun thing about the movie too, is the sort of like the subversion of the Hitchcock MacGuffin, which the money very much is. I mean, people have made a lot of the Hitchcock MacGuffin, and the funny thing is that it doesn't matter, right? I mean, like, it's something that Norman Bates takes no notice of. You know, but yeah, Janet Leigh dying. I mean, I could not imagine being a viewer in 1960 and seeing this unfold, where you're latched to this character for 45 minutes, and then to see her die and think, where is the movie going to take me next? And that was my point. I asked you originally what fault you find in the film, And I suppose the shock of the reveal of Norman as the killer perhaps worked just as well to equal out the shock of Janet Leigh's death. I feel like the film kind of loses steam after that point a little bit.
After the shower scene?
I do.
Yeah, it's that's fair. It's not as suspenseful for the most part because we know what's coming. I think if you didn't know what was coming, it retains that. But the meat of the film that's the best part is Marion in her struggle at work, her plan to steal the money. She's on the road in a rainstorm, driving to them, meeting Norman for the first time, and then climaxing with the shower scene. Yes, the murder of Arbogast is not as enthralling as the death of Marion. Yeah. So that's one thing. And also Vera Miles and John Gavin are nowhere near as compelling characters in this movie compared to Janet Leigh. And Absolutely. Norman takes a back seat almost to a certain extent after the shower scene. He's put on the ropes. He's kind of in a very different place than he was when we first met him. He's a lot less interesting of a person. And then the movie's carried by Vera Miles and John Gavin, they're fine, but he clearly apparently had a big beef with Vera Miles that he did not want to glamorize her at all in this movie and made her as boring as possible, which I don't get for your own movie. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know what, though? I think he might have been right, because had you brought in another Janet Leigh for that role. Now, I think that when you get to the remake, that Gus Van Sant identified this as a problem and gave us an actress to play that role who is very charismatic in a different way, right? Yeah. Because Vera Miles is sort of like the Janet Leigh if you like squinted a little bit, right? We go from a 10 to you know what I'm saying, right? Like I don't want to speak.
I mean, even the boyfriend comments and thinks that it's her at one point, right?
Yeah. Well, Matthew commented again just on how brutal the scene is too, and it's like you think about this, it's like how sadistic was Hitchcock to like cut to that drain of her blood going down the drain, and it's just like, dude, this is like it's brutal, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's really quite a scene.
And also, I think being in black and white is much more impactful than the color version that we see in the remake. It doesn't add any level of extra intensity. No. In fact, it looks more fake to me, at least. Yeah. As we'll get there.
Well, and we'll get to Gus Van Sant's like editing in shots of storms and eyeballs and other cutaways. It's just
and just not to go too far into that, but I noticed that in the Arbogast murder, I did not see it in the shower scene unless I was not paying attention closely enough.
It's there.
Okay. Subliminal,
He cuts to like skulls and storms and stuff, and you're like, what are you?
Like a random tree in a desert oasis.
Yeah, right. Like U2 album covers. It's like, what are you doing?
Very artsy.
Like, the Trembling Colors, it has more impact than any slasher movie kills, no matter how brutal they are. 100%. And then Matt says, I recall reading that they used chocolate syrup for the blood. Yes, they did. But her on the ground there with her face pressed up against the floor and zooming in on her eye, or dollying out or zooming out from her eye, just brutal.
Also, and lots of people know this already, but I think it's worth bringing up that apparently the showing of the toilet was a huge controversy at the time too, which seems so ridiculous and stupid in retrospect, but apparently a toilet had never been shown on film before. And Hitchcock made a big point and stink about that we need to have this toilet in the movie to flush down important evidence.
Yeah. Well, he's right. And also he makes a point of making Norman, the creepy psycho character, the one who has sort of like apprehension about referring to the idea of a bathroom. Right.
Yes.
Maybe to connect them to his sensors.
Yeah. He goes in, and there's the,
there's the,
she's like the bathroom. Yeah.
The Arbogast killing. So obviously we then cut from what is an incredibly sensational short film back to kind of our plot. John Gavin, for me, flatline, terrible, boring.
Yes, and Hitchcock was not impressed with him either, as there's many
Horrible.
quotes in the making of book that was not. I think you can get more expression out of a piece of wood.
Yeah, he was bad.
Although, fun fact: the reason that he was not in Psycho 2, do you know why?
Why?
He was serving as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico under Ronald Reagan.
Oh, under Ronald Reagan. Oh, he's too
Yes.
busy. Is that why? I figured he just died.
No, he didn't die until a couple years ago.
Hey, Ronnie, can I be in Psycho too? No, you got to go down and talk to fucking Mexico. Oh, okay.
But yes,
that's like a real job.
Yeah, especially to Mexico, important country. Yeah.
It's not like Switzerland or something, which is usually a handout. Why'd they give him Mexico?
The best handout is which country? It's the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See. That's the ultimate.
That's the best one.
That's the ultimate one to get. Yeah.
When is someone going to get Martin Scorsese as the ambassador to Vatican City? Right.
I think there would be mass protests for that. But anyway.
No. He needs to make a Vatican movie, but go ahead.
Okay. So after Marion is murdered, I think, Psycho does slow down. It becomes much more of a detective investigatory movie at that point, more procedural, as we shift to Arbogast and Lila and Sam. Oh yeah, his name is Sam Loomis, interestingly enough, which then they co-opted for Halloween years later to make their central character, Dr. Sam Loomis.
Not realizing that a sequel would come out 3 years later or 5 years later, I guess. Right.
Yeah. So, it's still good. There's nothing I would change or do differently, but it's not the same movie after that.
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
After the shower scene, it's not nowhere near in the same league. It's still excellent though, but it's just
like you were saying. We were talking about reading the book a few weeks ago, and you were saying that it drags a bit towards the end.
Yeah, and the book drags way more by the end. You've kind of like got it, seen it, done it, got the picture. Do we need to keep belaboring the point at this time?
There's far too much internal monologue of Norman and Mother relationship that telegraphs the ending too easily.
Yes,
I would say.
Yes. Mother is much more of a character in the novel, though, that when you start reading it, you actually think that she's a real person that is still alive. In the movie, you're kind of like suspicious, even from the get-go, that there's something not quite right, because we never see Mother. We hear her, but we never see her. In the book, it's much easier to manipulate you and make you think that he's having this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in that way, the book it works. But I mean, it's just too telegraphed towards the end when Norman is having these kind of debates with Mother. And it's just too, he's sort of like, the omniscient narration of his thoughts is too, it gives away the idea, I think. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's sort of like, why aren't we seeing this Mother character, in the movie? Right. Now, I guess you could surmise as a viewer in the 60s that Mother is going to be so grotesque and horrible. It's a reveal that they're saving for the end. Right. Which was true in a certain sense. Right. And I think this movie is just so out of left field and wild and unbelievable that people were just going with it. I mean,
now you asked for other potential criticisms, and I didn't mention it, but the actual murder of Arbogast is always something that just looks very odd. The way it was decided.
I like it.
I have no problem with it, but it is very strange. It is very off-putting at the same time. It's
the fact that he's up against a rear screen projection and kind of falling backwards, like into
flailing like that. Yeah.
But in that way, it's sort of iconic because it's so, it calls attention to itself in a way that like Brian De Palma would do. You know what I mean? Where like Brian De Palma will use a split focus diopter shot and not try to even hide it. He's drawing attention to the fact that he's like doing something optically that's a special effect. You know what I'm saying? And like with Hitchcock, I don't know if he intended for this to look real, but to me, it's very stylish in the fact that it looks fake.
It looks, but it's also in a movie that is otherwise not fantasy driven by any means. This feels very fantastical. And also he's like, you wouldn't fall down the stairs like that. It's just very odd. So
Yeah.
it kind of just takes you out of the moment.
But you remember, it's seared into your brain though.
Yeah.
Right.
I think though, if you
know.
show this to most modern audiences, that's going to be a hang up for them. They'd be like, oh, that looks so fake.
Yeah, I think you're right.
In a movie that otherwise holds up, exceedingly well. Also, that's one of the points in terms of the screenplay. This feels very cutting edge and forward thinking for a 1960 movie. However, in just terms of the way people speak and the attitudes about what they're doing and all that, when you use the exact same script for a 1998 movie, it feels incredibly old-fashioned.
I will perhaps disagree with you there on certain items.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the remake now, or do you want to go into sequels and save the remake for the end?
I don't know. What do you think? I think we should just get it out of the way, because it's
Let's just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's your thoughts on the remake?
I used to like it. I used to have a higher opinion of it years ago. But I think, especially in watching it in proximity to the original and then the sequels all very much close together, I was just completely bored out of my mind with the remake. The word that kept coming, the word that kept coming into my mind was stillborn. This movie is like dead on arrival. It's like being kept alive artificially, yet there's no soul to this movie. It feels very hollow and empty. The casting choices are very strange. They do not fit the characters in the way that we're used to at all. For a movie that is designed to be so slavishly much like the original, designed in every way, we're going to reuse the same screenplay, we're going to reuse the same musical score, we're going to reuse the same camera shots, the same shooting locations to a certain extent. And then the things that are changed feel very jarring and off-putting. And number one is the motel and the mansion for one, which are arguably some of the most iconic images from the original that are the sets. And that's changed to a very like sleazy modern motel facade.
Yeah.
And then the casting choices, other than save Anne Heche, Vince Vaughn does not do it for me at all as Norman. And Julianne Moore is fine, but the others, Viggo Mortensen feels out of place as Sam, and William H. Macy is kind of lost on me as Arbogast.
I had a different opinion.
The remake, Trembling Colors says, I agree. The remake bores me so much I can barely get. And again, I was kind of like
that's
off
crazy.
The snooze land by midway through.
No, I disagree. I was fascinated by the remake. I had never seen it. I always wanted to see it. I watched it in conjunction with the original. I loved it. I thought the fact that it exists is amazing. Gus Van Sant should be applauded for being able to smuggle a college film experiment through the studio system. And dude, this is a fascinating piece of film artwork, in my opinion. It's a treasure. It's amazing that it got made, because what it sort of illuminates for you is film techniques that worked in the 60s but don't work now, or are bizarre and jarring, which is a great way to like analyze modern movies and their progression to the future. So like think about Arbogast's introduction in the original. That very, very tight close-up, for whatever reason, it works in black and white. And then it is a totally bizarre failure in the remake, right? Now, I guess your opinion on whether or not the remake is a failure or a success depends on what you think you should get out of it. I mean, what you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I should be entertained, right? I know that there's somewhere on the internet a Steven Soderbergh recut called Psychos, in which he will take the reverse shot moments of certain scenes, and he'll have Anne Heche play with Perkins, right? Which sounds fascinating. I have not seen it. I thought the remake was an incredible experiment, like so worthy of doing, incredible that it ever got made. It helped me appreciate the old movie in so many more ways, right? Like you said, there are parts of the script, like when John Gavin tells Janet Leigh, but when you get married, you're going to swing, right? Okay, that doesn't fucking mean anything in 1998. Or what the hell does that mean, right? Swinging has a new concept now. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, right?
Yes.
Now, I thought that the updates that he made were very deft, because John Gavin is just sort of like a guy in Hitchcock's. In this one, he's a blue collar dude, a little rough around the edges, good old boy. And I was actually shocked at how well the dialogue transcended the time, based on simply the delivery of the actors. If I could get actors in my movie to sit down and watch both of these films back to back, if I could possibly ever do that, I would, because I could explain to an amateur actor, hey, see how you read lines in different ways? They're, you can interpret, you can have a whole different scene if you just kind of bring something different to the mix, right? Like Anne Heche is doing all of Janet Leigh's lines, totally different character, right?
Yeah. Now the way that you just said that,
Yeah.
the way you described Janet Leigh's Marion, when I brought up the thing about when she invited Norman in, I can see that as someone who, as Anne Heche version of Marion, doing that. However, she is actually quite repulsed by Norman instead in her version of the movie, which is very different than what we saw in the original. So it's kind of like jarring in terms of her version of the character. You would actually expect maybe her to do this, but she's in actuality repulsed by this character and would never do that to begin with.
Oh, well, it's also a great sort of cultural study, because you could see how that original scene doesn't play in 1998. Well, and why not? Yeah. Well, I guess people are more savvy now. We've devolved into a more low trust society. So I mean, these are things that are illuminated through watching the updates that they made.
But also because Vince Vaughn is a much creepier, and I don't mean that in terms of how he's acting, it's just his physical appearance and everything is not as comforting a presence in the movie as Anthony Perkins is to her in the original. So there's definitely a sense that you would not feel comfortable opening up to this person the same way that someone would to Perkins in the 1960 version. So it's kind of like that too.
There are multiple problems with Vince Vaughn. I thought his performance was just fine. It was an interesting choice because you'll remember Vince Vaughn had not become the comedy guy at this point.
No.
He was the indie darling swingers guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also Vince Vaughn is handsome in a way that women appreciate. That's not apparent to men. Right. And so he has to play up the creepiness thing to make it work. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense to the chat?
I understand what you're saying, but I think what made Norman Bates so iconic as a character in the original when played by Anthony Perkins was that he was so disarming and so hidden as to what he truly was, that makes him much more monstrous than if you see someone who on the outside appears very ugly or alarming. You know what I mean?
I'm with you.
It takes away something when
Vince
you're
Vaughn was
immediately suspicious that this guy's going to be a freaking murderer.
Like, who would have been a good 2000s era, like Alan Cumming, maybe, or like,
or even like Cillian Murphy nowadays.
Elijah Wood, right? They could have done it back then, but that's sort of like has a feminine.
Vince Vaughn's also too stocky. It just doesn't feel right to me.
He has no feminine qualities. Vince Vaughn is a very masculine man. In order for this to sell this, he has to be creepy, right?
Yes.
And so the sort of masturbation interlude is added.
He's creepy in the wrong ways. He's creepy as a imposing force, which is not what the character is meant to be. He's in that regard.
Yeah. So
I don't disagree with you about the experimentation aspect of the movie and the fact that it's a fascinating piece of film history and all that. I don't 100%. Disagree with any of that, and it's perfectly watchable. But if you had the choice, would you ever choose to watch the 98 version over the 60 version?
I mean, no, I would never show somebody the 98 version in absence of knowledge or a previous viewing
Yeah.
of the original, because it wouldn't make
Precisely.
sense. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, like, we did live in a period of time in the 90s where like they could engage you with the idea of experimentation in film history as a blockbuster movie. I mean, Van Sant even said that, where people are like, why do a shot for shot remake? He's like, well, number one, I wanted to do it. And number two, it's a great way to sell the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I would much, if you're going to remake Psycho, this is the way to do it. Like, to remake it. Okay, fuck off. Just go watch Friday the 13th part 8. Right. You know what I'm saying?
And I agree with you, because even if you wanted to make the argument that you could adapt the book a little bit more, there's not much left to adapt in the book that wasn't done in the original film. And in fact, the changes that were made to the screenplay from the book were actually in the movie's favor. And that was changing the physical description of Norman, and also making Marion the focus of the movie in the beginning, that that is the character that we, the audience, identify with and follow until her demise. The book starts with Norman and Mother in the beginning, and it's kind of like you're wondering what's the point of this? What's the point of this movie, or how are we going to get to what we know Psycho is? So I think those changes are made for the better.
This isn't The Thing exactly, where it's like, well, John Carpenter wanted to remake The Thing from Another World, but then he went back to the sourse material, which there's more there. This is a fine novel. If you read it, you'd get a kick out of it, especially if you've seen the movie. But anything that was left out of Hitchcock's film, any elements, I think are expanded upon in the sequel movies, to where you don't need to, I'm going to remake the book Psycho. It's not exactly a classic. It's fine.
It's not needed. No. It's a very easy read, though. It's very quick. I got through it like in a day and a half, something like that. It's just very easy,
it's very fast,
easy, quick read.
Yeah.
Totally enjoyable, though.
Absolutely.
Robert Bloch, by the way, wrote 3 episodes of the original Star Trek series. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, 3 of the very weird, they're like the horror themed episodes. So he wrote What Are Little Girls Made Of, which is the one where Christine Chapel's ex-husband is making everyone turn into robots or something like that. And then Catspaw, which is the one where they go to the Halloween planet where the people turn into cats and skeletons and stuff like that. And Wolf in the Fold, which is the one where Scotty is actually Jack the Ripper.
Haven't seen any of those. They all sound
definitely try those out.
Great. So I was going to say too about one more thing about the remake. William H. Macy, I liked a lot as Arbogast.
He's fine. Doesn't
even
do a
though
whole lot.
Why did they make him wear a little fucking dumb hat? That was stupid.
Because it's shot for shot. You got to have him have the fedora, you know?
Yeah, that's not true, because Julianne Moore's got headphones on and is like,
okay, can we just say that is the dumbest line of dialogue to change from let me get my
Walkman
to let me get my Walkman. Like, did we really need that? Because nobody uses coats in 1998 anymore.
I don't know. I mean, was that a joke? Was that funny back then? I don't know. But the Psycho remake is it's. I'm glad it was made. Anyone who's talking inordinate shit about it, like the reviewers who are like, "Why would you ever even make this? What a dumb idea!" It's like, fuck you. This is very interesting. There's never been anything like it before. It was a big swing. I don't even know if it was intended to be a hit. Right? This is Gus Van Sant being highly weird on the dime of Hollywood. And so,
well, he had a lot of, goodwill after Goodwill Hunting, if you will. He had a blank check to make whatever he wanted. And from what I've read and listened to, they would present him with a list of proposed projects or properties that were available at Universal. And this was on the list. And so he was like, well, okay, Psycho it is.
It's a great point from Matthew, which says they reinterpret Shakespeare all the time. Why not do a new version of a film classic? Yeah, and that's the cool thing about this, that sort of applicable to like a play, right? Now, the form of plays are all about performance and set design. Remakes of movies happen all the time, right? But to do it in the sort of shot-for-shot way that he does, which, by the way, I had been told by certain people that it's actually really not shot for shot. Well, it's pretty goddamn close, right? And I know there are certain scenes like the beginning with Anne Haitian, Vigo, where the shots, there's a dolly that moves around a little more than it did, but there's the depth of field is a little deeper than it was in the 60s. On some of these shots, the close-ups are a little closer, but the blocking is just about the same. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like very, very similar. It's a really incredible thing that exists.
The opening shot for the Phoenix skyline was apparently what Hitchcock intended
Wanted.
to do. Yes, but was unable to capture due to limitations in budget and technology at the time. To have that helicopter shot that dollies into the window where they are. So that's fine. Cool. But also, like you mentioned, the subliminal cuts of weird artistic avant-garde expressions during the murder scenes are bizarre.
That was beyond bizarre to me, because as a filmmaker, with your mission being I'm doing a shot for shot, well, it's like what more example of what you want to recreate and try to attempt to restage and understand better would be the shower scene. You'd think that would be the most shot for shot he would have done, right?
Now, do you think that the shower
part
scene
where he deviates?
Do you think it's as impactful in the remake?
Less.
I agree. I think it's much less impactful. And also the way the rest of the musical score is pretty much the same. Like just re-recorded by Danny Elfman. But the shower scene music feels weirdly off and is not as striking for that moment. I don't know what it is.
I'm with you. I'm so with you. I'm
something
totally
that's
with
very
you.
odd. It takes you away and you're like distracted because everything else is the same, but now this is different at this important key moment.
It's not as impactful, and there's something weird and tinny and hollow about it, which is bizarre because the cool thing is that, you know, Bernard Herrmann's score is used. Now, supposedly Danny Elfman sort of reinterpreted it, right? The sequences in which Marion Crane is driving and they use the score are incredible. And I was thinking
exactly
to myself,
the same. Feels
wow,
exactly
like this is terrific, right? And the one other scene I really liked was the cop scene.
Oh, that feels exactly like they found the same actor there. That's James Remar. Yeah.
Yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah.
He's so good. And they
that was
redo it
on
like
the exact same location.
Apparently. I was thinking it was. It looked exactly the same. Yeah, it was like very cool. Trembling Color says, I'm surprised that Rope hasn't been remade several times, considering it's such a contained film and could be done easily, technically wise. It's too talky for modern audiences, I think.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. And also, I would say the second most impactful in terms of like visceral quality. I've talked to you about this before, Ryan, but like Rope to me is a hard movie to watch. I love Rope, but like, oh, it's brutal. Like
makes you squirm.
Oh God. I'm not just like playing here. I'm being real. Like I remember I saw Drew Barrymore on Turner Classic Movies and she was introducing her favorite films. And one of them was Rebel Without a Cause, a horrible movie that I hate. And she was saying, oh, it's got such staying power. It's, you know, it still works. No, it doesn't. It's a fucking horrible movie. And
I disagree with you on that, but I don't want to get into it.
It's so dated, you know. And look, I'm not a dated guy. I don't like that movie at all. And I think James Dean is like horribly miscast as a loser. And I can't even, you know, what makes me squirm more than the Psycho murder is when they're all doing animal noises in the fucking planetarium. That's like one of the most cringe inducing scenes of all time.
We're getting a little off topic.
Sorry. But I was going to say Rope, like the fact that they invite the parents of the murdered kid over to the house to have dinner on his like coffin is like so
perverted.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you don't see a thing, but it's like, oh my God. You know,
it's interesting because I used to not like Rope. I watched it for the first time many, many years ago, probably in high school, and I just didn't care for it. Didn't care for it at all. And then you were going on and on and on about it, so I gave it another rewatch, maybe last year or whatever, and a totally different opinion, much more appreciative of it, and it's definitely that I love now.
Rope, in my opinion, is about academia, I think, more than anything. Like Jimmy Stewart is the villain in the film. oh, I didn't intend for anybody to do this. I just wanted to talk
Oh,
about it and bullshit about it in my class. It's like, no, fuck you, dude. Like, these things have power, and like,
mm,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
That's that's the cool thing about it. But I was going to say, this is sort of self-indulgent here, but the remake of Rope, that'd be tough. If I were to talk to any young college film student, I was planning on doing a shot for shot remake, very stripped down, black and white, of Notorious, and I never did it. And it's one of the great regrets of my life. Is as a college kid, I didn't remake Notorious because the script is so good. It's minimal characters, and whatever. But we can move on to Psycho 2.
Yeah, so I'm glad you enjoyed it. I definitely
I did.
I mean, Psycho the remake. Just to finish, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot less than I have in the past. So we'll see. Okay, Psycho 2. What'd you think of this one?
I was shocked at how much I liked it.
Good, excellent.
Yeah, the cool thing
This
about
is great.
the cool thing about Psycho 2 is that it's got a great premise and script, and it's a really interesting and I think natural evolution of the first movie in certain ways. So if you haven't seen Psycho 2, the cool thing about it is that Norman is like the good guy in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really interesting and cool direction to go with it. Because I had thought initially, okay, this came out in 1983. So obviously somebody at Paramount or wherever, right, Universal was sitting around and saying, okay, Halloween, Friday the 13th, what do we have? Psycho? Fucking do another one, right? And so I thought it would be sort of like a repeat retread with more gore. What I didn't expect is that it's like a very, I would say, like, the movie has pretensions of ideas about, when is somebody innocent and when can he be forgiven for his past crimes? Okay, fine. It's all very boilerplate. It's not incredibly profound. They're trying to go for something with that. But the cool thing for me was just like the innovations of the plot and where they decided to take the character of Norman, which I very much appreciated. If you guys haven't seen it, Norman is released from prison at the beginning of the film. We bring back, what's her name?
Vera Miles.
Vera Miles to play the elderly version of her character from Psycho. And she's enlisted her
Keep in mind,
daughter.
She's not that elderly.
But when you were 50, you were old as shit in the 80s, right? Not so much anymore. There was no such thing as a MILF in the 80s. It didn't happen until the late 90s.
Now Perkins looks good for his age in the movie.
He looks great.
Sure.
He's terrific in the movie too.
Yeah.
It's like, but to pitch that and say, hey, Norman's not the murderer. Like, he's the victim of people trying to make him go crazy. Yeah,
they're gaslighting him, to use a overused expression.
Which is such an interesting way to go with the movie. I thought it was terrific. I loved it. And also to expand on the lore a little bit in a very modern way, to where, Norman refers to the diner in the first movie, and they go, okay, well, he does, and so they go, okay, well, we'll make that a reality. We'll put that into the film. It's a sort of slavishly devoted film, directed by the guy who did a favorite of ours, Road Games.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, he doesn't sell out. He ports over the same theory that worked for Road Games, which is slow burn and engage you with the characters, and it works. And there's also something else he did in Road Games, which is just sort of like suggestion of violence, suggestion of something impending, some doom encroaching, and it keeps you hooked. I thought it was a terrific movie. I really liked it.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed this one. It's much more psychological thriller. It's much more implied violence. It's much more wondering, is Norman going to snap again? Or has he snapped?
Yeah.
Was he ever cured to begin with? Now, interestingly enough, as someone who was, the character in the movie is someone who was released from a psychiatric mental prison, there's never any real talk about him checking up with, he does check in with his psychiatrist every once in a while, but you think like they'd be going there and like forcibly medicating. I guess if this movie was made nowadays, we'd be seeing them like trying to forcibly medicate him or go to ridiculous therapy sessions or something like that. So there's none of that. But he is a very sympathetic character in this movie, especially when you realize that the people are trying to drive him insane again just so he can go to jail. So people basically, Vera Miles and her, I guess, movie's like 40 years old at this point, so whatever.
Yeah, Lily Tomlin.
Norman falls for this very striking young woman who he meets at the diner, who's been kind of bullied by the diner owner because she can never quite get anything right. She gets dumped by her boyfriend, and so creepy old man basically asks her, "Oh, would you like to come stay at my motel that I own?" And of course she invites herself in and all this stuff. And
you as the audience are watching that, and you're like, "Don't go to the hotel." Because you don't want Lily Tomlin to die, but you don't want Norman to relapse. You're like, don't Norman.
Yes,
everything's
precisely.
Going fine. Yeah.
And she keeps tempting him in the most provocative ways at every step of the way, right? Let's make us, and there's very much many callbacks to the original film, but never in a distracting way that feels like they're doing it just as a wink, wink, nod, nod, like to please the audience, like they would nowadays. Like for instance, when he goes to the motel office and he's about to grab the key for cabin number 1 at one point, or let me make you a sandwich. And then of course he can't handle the knife. He has like PTSD basically for holding a big kitchen knife. And so he gives it to her, but then she's like, no, here, take the knife. And you're like, no, don't give Norman the knife.
Don't do it. Yeah. It's great. It really is. Like, it keeps you totally hooked. You're with it all the way. And it was well directed. There were moments where you're like, okay, we have to throw a bone to the audience who's used to Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th Part 3 and have like the scene where the teens, they want to go into the Norman Bates home and fuck in the basement. Like, okay, great idea. Like, you could break into the hotel and have a bed, right?
Yeah, of all the places to go, let's go to the murder house in the basement. And
dude, could you imagine? It's hard enough to close, but to convince your girl, like, we have to do it in a fucking abandoned house basement,
on that
like
dirty old mattress that's probably like mold infested and
terrible. But like, I think the movie strains a little credulity when they introduced the idea of the second mother that was the real mother, and you're kind of like,
yes.
Okay.
I think it redeems itself by in Part 3 they retcon that out of existence. That this was basically some crazy old lady that thought she was Norman's mother when actually she's not. She's Norman's aunt. So
that's the part of the Part 3 that I was like, when the journalist is being confronted by Norman and she starts rattling off like 3 movies worth of fucking, and I'm like, how invested am I really in the mythology of Norman Bates here and his house and his hotel and the fucking diner? You know what I mean? Right. And his world.
And not to jump the gun, but that's the big problem with Part 4, the beginning, is that how much are you really invested in the origin story of Mother Bates and her psychiatric problems?
How much longer can we lean on the iconography of the old house and the hotel and the diner? How much more can we get out of this? And every other little tangential side character that got referenced in the first movie. You know what I mean?
I think it works for the first 3.
I agree. As far as Part 2 goes, I had something. Go ahead.
Oh, just interestingly enough, for the history of this movie, this was going to be a cable movie when it was first being in its inception. That was going to be a made-for-cable movie, and Anthony Perkins was not interested in reprising his role. But after the script came in, he read it and he signed on, and so it became a theatrical film. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit to his history. The other thing is,
I'm trying to formulate my opinion on the conversation that's happening in the chat about black and white versus color on this movie. And for whatever reason, I feel like the first film is very dreamlike, and we're entering a state with Norman Bates to where the scales have fallen from his eyes in a certain way, and we're seeing things clearly. And in my opinion, the color version works because it brings these things that are scarier in black and white, like the hotel and the house, into more of a realistic relief with color, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that was the intention. Also, I think you have the psychological thematic element of repainting the hotel in yellow that never gets finished, which I think is sort of a metaphor for Norman's progress. He's continually interrupted while painting this house. Had he finished painting the hotel, would that have been a new start for him with color? And I also don't think the film, maybe it's the version I watched, I don't think the contrasts would work. Like maybe you'd have to just up the contrast more on the sequel, but I think the sequel exists better as sort of this coda idea to the first movie, and trying to pair them together with black and white, I don't think makes a lot of sense.
I think it looks fine in color. The colors are very subdued. It's not very distracting or off-putting.
No.
Like the color in the 98 remake is off-putting because everything is kind of grossly bright and fluorescent.
Well, he throws it in your face with the lime green opening title.
Yeah, the lime green opening titles, but also just the fluorescent lights in the bathroom to even accentuate whites and things like that are very off-putting. This is very subdued, and especially as you spend a lot more time in the Bates mansion than you have in the original film, and so you get a very old-fashioned sensibilities through that aesthetic. I mean, they're living even beyond anything that would have been contemporary in 1960, let alone 1983 at that point. So you step back into another world at that point too. Colors are very dark, muted, and so I don't think it's distracting by any means.
I think maybe what it would have worked is if you were to desaturate the film as Norman degresses in his mental state to where it's black and white at the end. I think that would be effective.
Did you like Dennis Franz in the movie as the sleazy
I did.
hotel manager who gets his comeuppance? Yeah.
I liked Robert Loggia as well, who I remember him from Lost Highway. You seen Lost Highway? The David Lynch movie? Oh, I fucking hate tailgaters. He's so great in that. And also Tim and Eric's $1 Million Movie. He's great in that as well. I paid $1 billion for this piece of shit.
For this movie, most of the victims, I could be wrong because it's been like a couple of weeks now, but most of the victims are people that we don't necessarily feel much sympathy for. Would that be a fair assessment? And that's, I think, what also, because even if you think that Norman has relapsed and that he's back on a murder spree, he's killing the people that are hurting him or are causing him pain. And that doesn't justify it, obviously, but it's like, you get it. Psycho 3, I think, has a problem because he starts killing just random people for no reason.
Yeah, the girl at the party in the bathroom.
Yeah, the girl on the toilet. And it's just there. The girl in the phone booth. So
we need to kill.
Yeah, we need to up the body count, basically, in part 3.
Yeah.
For no reason. So that, I think, works to 2's advantage. There's also just it has a lot of irony, a lot of camp value to it that makes you feel disarmed at the same time of driving up the suspense in other parts. So all of the little even the things like where he's working in the diner and he's flipping around the wheel with the order slips on it, and then he finds all the notes from Mother, and you kind of chuckle and you kind of laugh because it's so ridiculous, the message on there, and it says like love Mother, and it's deadly serious because you know that either he's imagining it or someone's gaslighting him. But it's also kind of like humorous to a certain extent.
What I liked, though, was this idea of mystery. Like, I was engaged with the idea of who the killer was, right? And you do get multiple sort of red herring ideas. Ultimately, I'm your secret real mother. I was like, okay. I guess you tied that up a little bit. I thought, too, the one thing that bothered me was this idea of there only being a small pocket of the town that was against Norman's rehabilitation. The good old boy sheriff being like, well, he did his time and he's better now. I'm like, come on, what? You know what I'm saying? To where they were so offended by the idea that Norman maybe could be behind the murders. It's like, give me a break, right?
Yeah.
That guy'd be the first dude pointing a finger at Norman.
Again, It's very suspicious that all of a sudden he's back, and then 2 minutes later, people start dying in horrible stabbing murders. What What are the
Yeah,
odds?
well, we don't have any evidence that it's Norman, so stop drawing conclusions, little
I
girl.
gotta check
But,
your house out, son.
yeah, exactly. That old good old boy sheriff would be the first dude like fucking locking Norman back up in a
And
cage,
and
right?
funnily enough, in part 3, he's like, "You played me like a fool, Norman. I was on your side."
Yeah. Anything else on part 2? I feel like I didn't talk enough about it because there was a lot that I really enjoyed about it.
The only
I want to
kill
make it
that is
known.
the only kill scene that is just absolutely ridiculous is Vera Miles' kill scene.
That poor woman. Oh my God.
The
Could you imagine
freaking
her
knife
going?
through the face,
Oh
and it's like,
my God, dude. That poor gal. Like she came up in the Hollywood studio system. They probably taught her how to talk. They taught her how to hold a teacup, how to be prim and proper, how to act, the mid-Atlantic accent. And then in the 80s, she finds herself getting stabbed through the face. And it's like, yeah, this is movies now. Sorry. You know what I mean? Right? You're
well,
lucky to
this is
get
what happens.
cast.
This is the natural course of career progression, you know?
I know you're like 42 years old or whatever, but like, you're old now. So like, you know what I'm saying? This is what
Yeah.
42 looks like in 1983. But no, I really enjoyed it. I found myself fairly interested in the twists and turns of the screenplay. And I guess we didn't talk about Anthony Perkins' performance, but it's good.
It's very good. He's very subdued, very cautious, it looks like he's spaced out for a lot of it. He's in this
Yeah.
fugue state. And so it makes sense with, is he doing it or is he not doing it? He doesn't know.
In a way though, it's kind of a brave choice because I mean Anthony Hopkins is a guy who sort of pops in and out of films throughout the late 70s and 80s. But he never had Perkins. Sorry, he never had a role that matched Norman Bates, and so his big debut as the star again, it would have been, I think, an easy choice to try to choose scenery and let people know why they liked you in the first place and get back on the stage. But he makes the brave choice to do what the script asks of him, which is to be sort of this victimized character that is just kind of likable to the audience, right?
No, I agree. It's also very nice to see someone like that it is for better or for worse, Psycho is his career defining role. Now, some people may have resented that this movie, amongst everything else that you did in your career, was the movie that everyone will remember you for. And then to lean into it in your later years when, let's face it, at that point, I mean, how many other big roles where his name is going to be above the marquee is he going to get? So to lean into it and play off of that, it's a very smart decision that I don't think a lot of other actors of that time period, of that caliber, would have necessarily done. They might have felt it was beneath them. But it was a smart thing to do, and it kind of made him more relevant as the years went by.
Well, and I have to imagine he probably had a conversation with Leonard Nimoy about this subject, right? Because I think their careers sort of parallel in certain ways, to where they wanted to be known for, and they both parlayed
for Spock,
yeah, they parlayed their success in a certain role into a director's gig. Obviously, it was more successful for Leonard Nimoy. He went on to make a few movies, 3 Men and a Baby. People don't really remember now, but it was quite the hit back in the day. Star Trek 3 and 4. But he directs part 3, and I was very excited to see part 3, knowing he directed it, because it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, and the kind of movie I like to watch, which is or get excited to watch, which is one in which you are trying to prove you've got chops, right? So you can see in Psycho 3 the style and the tricks are like out in full force, right? I could take inspiration from that, especially from older movies, because they are tricks that are doable. Like I think about the moment too, where there were multiple times I had to rewind and figure out how something was done, right? I mean, the style is at 11. I don't want to hear any conversation about how Psycho 3 should be in black and white, because the use of color is so strong in the movie. I think about moments where Norman is lit almost entirely by green light, or that moment in the rain outside the car where it almost looks like a proto-style Sin City kind of shot. And the moment in the bar where the barkeep turns towards the television, there's whitewater rafting on television, and we get sort of this imperceptible close-up cut to the television that you think is initially her, watching it, and then it pans over and it's the television in Norman's room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like that's a great little trick there, you know. So that's what I liked about part 3. Not so much the story or the plot, which I kind of honestly zoned out on. I mean, it was a little overwrought, very overdramatic. The characters are drawn to 11. But what are your thoughts on Psycho 3?
I like it. Definitely a step down from 2. It's definitely, as we mentioned before, trying to match its contemporaries in terms of its body count and, bloodlust. I don't think that necessarily diminishes it for what it is. I
No.
think it introduces a lot of other interesting concepts and takes on again, we're always aping the same ideas and motifs from Psycho 1, but this one plays with them in different ways and adds a very interesting religious aspect to it that I would have never thought to introduce. Like, for instance, our main character, our new Marion stand-in, is we have to have a Marion stand-in for every movie, and this one literally is like a dead ringer for her, is this ex-nun who escapes the convent after she inadvertently causes the death of another nun by pushing her down off the roof of some of the bell tower, some ridiculous thing. And so she's on the run. She hooks up with Norman, thinks that he is a troubled soul that needs to be, redeemed. She's actively trying to commit suicide. And in fact, we get probably one of the more interesting plays on the shower scene that could almost be a parody in and of itself from The Simpsons or something like that.
But it's done so well. It's creepy.
Yes, it is. And it's scary. It's creepy because he's relapsing after the events of Psycho 2. Like, he's whatever shred of sanity that he held on to after being out of the hospital is totally gone at this point, after they gaslit him into insanity and he killed what's her name? Mrs. Glick, Mrs. Gloss. I don't remember the lady. So Mother's back, he has a new stuffed mother and he's off his rocker again. So this new nun, she feels guilty about what she did. She's checked into the motel. She's going to take a bath. Norman dresses up as Mother to go kill her because he reminds her of Marion. As he pulls back the shower curtain, she's in the bathtub filled with blood, with her wrists slit, and the blood's like squirting out of her arteries there.
Kind of shocking.
It is. It's quite shocking. What's even more shocking is that it snaps him out of his psychosis and he brings her to the hospital.
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
She's the girl that's going to save him.
Yes.
Right. And she is such a pathetic, sort of character, right? Like in The Rain, Jeff Fahey, guitar rock star guy, who he's great. Like in the movie, he's he's giving a slasher film performance. And he's chewing it up, and he's great. But she is a very like sort of sorrowful, sad character in the film. And I was thinking, I go, are they going to kill this poor lady too? Like a la Janet Leigh. Because like you said, Norman is back on the stick in this film. He's back in the garb. He's wearing the mother clothes. He's doing his thing. But and
very casually too. It's like there's nothing.
Yeah.
He has no like no remorse or no inclination that there's anything wrong. Psycho 2, he is constantly on edge, thinking that what's going on? Am I going crazy again? Am I descending into badness? And now he's in a blissful state of ignorance to the fact that he is going around murdering people.
Yes. Yeah, and he's doing it. I mean, like he attacks like a party, very 80s slasher style. And to be crude, the kill is good. You know what I mean? It's a great moment when he kills the hooker or the gal outside in the phone booth, and they cut to her feet and she's in the glass, and it's very effective. It's well done. I mean, both that and the bathroom killing of the girl. I mean, you would get your money's worth if what you were looking for was sort of a Friday the 13th style movie, but also it's got a lot of style and moments that resonated with me and were effective set pieces, like when Jeff Fahey is not dead and chokes Norman while he's driving. And the water scene. I mean, those are great. I mean, they're really well done. But the movie is sort of like, to me, a reel of set pieces that are like it's like a an audition reel for a director, which is fine, But like, there's a lot of really like the journalist character. I don't know, flatline, But like,
of all the characters in the movie, to
What is
not
she
get
trying
their
to do
comeuppance, to
exactly?
not get no, but to not get their comeuppance
I
and get
agree.
slashed. That's the one that you want because
She was horrible.
she's making life miserable for Norman, and she is the quote
Yeah.
hero by exposing him, and it's totally
Right.
contrary to what we've been trained to feel for this character, for Norman.
But I mean, the visuals are on. I mean, they're at a 10 in this film. I mean,
Oh
I'm
yeah, and
thinking of
especially how about the death of the nun girl at the end of the movie where
with
she
the
falls down the
candles.
stairs. She
Oh,
falls
it's
down the
great.
stairs into the arrow.
It's the Arbogast remake.
Yes.
You know,
but
that was
it
so
pierces
fun.
her in the heart, does it not?
Through the head.
Oh, through the head. Yes, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah. So it reminded me a little bit of like this. This is where sort of you start to get to a place in a series where like you're overwatching the original movies to mine any kind of detail you can. Oh, did you realize in the first movie there was a statue of an angel with an arrow? Like, let's bring that back. Like, you ever see the Brady Bunch movie Part 2? Yeah. They hilariously played on this with like the Brady Bunch. If you ever watched the original show, they had this like horrific statue of some sort of like Indian elephant in their house all the time.
Yeah.
Never commented upon. It was an element of the show. And in the second movie, they decide to say that it's actually like filled with heroin, which is quite hilarious. Yeah, very funny. But it reminded me of that. You know what I mean? Like where you're just scanning the original text for any kind of story bit you can mine out of it.
Yeah. Perhaps the best moment for me, at least, the one that sticks out in my mind for this movie is after he kills the girl, I think in the bathtub. Oh, no, excuse me, in the toilet. He disposes of her body in the ice machine. And then,
it's great.
And then when they're going around looking for this girl, the sheriff's like, oh, okay, well, we inspected the entire motel and we didn't find anything. Let me grab some ice. And he grabs a bloodied ice cube and he puts it in his mouth and starts sucking on it. And you're watching Norman as he's like, oh man,
it's terrific. You know what, Perkins?
I'm done now.
Dude, Trembling Color says Anthony Perkins as a director had cool choices and he could have had a second wind as a horror director. Yeah, absolutely. The guy had style. I mean, he had ideas. He was a really effective director. I think this movie lives on its style, right? I mean, it's and the performances. Like I think Jeff Fahey he's good. You know, I mean, I like his confrontation with Norman where he gets hit in the head with the ashtray and they go at it and like he has that ultimatum where he's like, well, I'm going to hit you up for cash. Like, I mean, I thought that was a good twist. And I thought he was good in the movie. I thought it just seems like the movie is sort of running on fumes in terms of plot. And it's sort of like a coda to part 2. It's like, there's no real like thrust in my opinion. Right.
It's only able to exist because Norman is not caught at the end of part 2 because he gets off the hook. Right.
Yeah.
That's the only way part 3 can even exist. And the fact that he does get caught at the end of part 3 means that there's nothing left to do because what are you going to have him do? Break out of the mental institution or get released again? There's not much left to do here, and you can't have him get caught for the third time.
I would say we were talking about the book, and if you want to get an idea of what a cinematic portrayal of Norman's conversations with his mother from the book would look like in live action, it's this movie, right? And also, I guess you get new things like we've never seen Norman in the transitional state of wearing mother's clothes and doing her voice and performing as her during the murder. Well, you get this in this movie. I mean, whether that's something we needed to see, I guess is up for debate, but it's new. You get that now, right? Also,
the desecration of the mother corpse at the end of the movie is quite good.
Yeah, it's over, right? It's like mother's dead now, and Norman says, I mean, they kind of ruin it with him having I mean, it's a good ending with the secret hand in his.
Come on, that's fantastic. It's
great, but like honestly though, like when Norman at the end was like, "You're going back to jail now, son," and he goes, "But now I'm free." I go, okay, this movie has justified its existence because this is now the end, right? But then when he did I'm doing the repeat of the smile, look at the camera from part 1, I was like, okay. So,
but it's so great because he's got the severed hand and he's
it's good. I mean, you can't knock him for it. It's a good ending to walk out the door with, right?
The only thing that they could have done if they made a real Psycho 4 would it have been an interesting. I just thought it was now maybe not. have him in the mental institution for a movie, and somehow he's able to get loose and go around and kill people in there. That could have been a movie.
Yeah, that could have been a great movie.
Someone helping him from the inside or something like that. Some orderly who was upset, like a true crime guru,
a super fan.
Yeah, helping him or going around and implicating that. There you go. Could have been Psycho 4.
I was going to ask you. You bought the Robert Bloch collection of the books, part 2 and 3, and as I understand, the part 2 and 3 of the books are not in line with the films at all. They're totally different. Did you happen to get to any of those? Do you have a desire to?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. Psycho 2, the book, came around concurrently with the movie, I believe, and was like a satire on Hollywood slasher movies to a certain extent. So they were not interested in adapting that at all. And then Psycho 3, which is, I think, called Psycho House, came out like in 1990 or 91 or something like that.
Okay. So we'll transition into what the actual part 4 was. And I hate to end this. I mean, we talked about the remake before, which could have been a great crescendo to the show, because I'm sorry, audience, I failed in my charge. I did not watch part 4. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry. 5 movies is a lot. 5 movies is a lot. I'm sorry.
It is. It is a lot. Yeah. Psycho 4 is not good. This was the first time that I had ever seen it. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, I'd actively avoided this movie because prequels just don't do it for me. And I feel like we knew enough about the history and the legacy of Norman and Mother that to see it dramatized was not necessary. What else are we going to get from this? And maybe people who watched the Bates Motel TV show may feel different, as that is the entire premise. Basically, is a prequel series. I think I watched like 1 or 2 episodes of that, and it was like, how are you going to mine this for an entire season or more episodes?
Can I ask you some questions on part 4? Like, do we see the dramatization of Norman poisoning his mother and her boyfriend?
Very much.
Yes, I don't need to see that.
Like to the letter. We get to meet the mother's new husband, who is a total asshole.
Okay,
he's a bully. He bullies Norman. He tries to make Norman into a real man. And of course, Norman's like a shy and kind of simpering mama's boy and not interested in, I don't remember what activity they were going to do, like, pass the football around or do, some other kind of sport thing. The movie is both a sequel and a prequel. And when it's a sequel, it's actually a sequel to part 1. It actively eliminates part 2 and part 3 from the story. So they ignore the events of part 2 and part 3. So what this is Norman has been released from the mental institution.
Oh.
He's now actually married and living a normal life, more or less. And he calls into a radio talk show that's hosted by CCH Pounder, who's fantastic. She's the best part of the movie, in my opinion. I love her. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
No.
Have you ever seen her on TV? Okay.
I think I've had one at McDonald's.
Not a quarter pounder, CCH Pounder.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
She's got a fantastic voice, and having her be a radio host was a great choice here. But anyway, they're doing a radio talk show about matricide and people who killed their mothers and stuff like that. So of course Norman's listening, and he calls in and he's like, "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm the expert on killing your mother and all that." And so through this narrative device, he relates his entire life history. And he alludes to it at a certain extent that he's going to now kill his wife. And the reason that he's going to kill his wife is that she's pregnant. And he is deathly afraid that his child will carry on the insanity and the evil that his mother had and that he feels that he has. And this is what's driving him to this inflection point. And of course, we get a lot of like just overdone, overwrought acting from Olivia Hussey as Mother Bates, who's going through wild swings of mania and depression at different times, belittles Norman, humiliates Norman as a child, makes him dress up in women's clothing, punishes him by making him get naked and go outside. And the weirdest moment, of course, is when they're like wrestling on the floor and like playing with each other in a very incestuous kind of like sexual way. And Norman gets an erection. Yeah.
This is a television film?
Yes, this is a television film. I mean, you don't see it, but she feels it. And she immediately snaps and, makes him go to his room or no, actually sit in the closet and tells him to, like, when he needs to go to the bathroom, he needs to urinate by squatting down in a bowl in the closet. Yeah.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
This sounds like the prequel to the last 15 minutes of Hitchcock Psycho, which we don't care. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
exactly.
This is the psychological Freudian,
oh yeah, for sure. It's all of that. It's all of that, but played out in a very mundane and uninteresting way. Yes, Henry Thomas, who was in E.T., plays a young Norman Bates. He's quite good. There's a lot of moments though that are just absolutely ridiculous, and that it makes you wonder: is Norman pathological because of some innate characteristic,
Who cares?
or is it nature versus nurture? But also, he's so weird. There's all these young, hot, attractive women that are coming on to him at different points in his life, and he could not be more disinterested. And he takes this one girl is literally throwing herself at him. She convinces him to bring her up to the house, and they're about to go to bed, and then he's like, "Oh, let me go check on my mother," and then he kills her.
Okay.
And this is before Mother has like totally humiliated him and psyched him out.
The thing I liked about and appreciated about part 3 too was that it did try to be a sequel to part 2. I mean, like, this whole idea in sequels to be Mick Garris and be like, you know what, part 2 and 3 were bad. I'm doing the sequel to part 1 as part 4. Like, come on, get over yourself.
Well, I think they wrote themselves into a corner.
Sure did. You could just do the prequel. You don't have to do the,
Well, because then if you did the prequel only, you would not have Anthony Perkins, and you have right. So yes, this was I think a Showtime made-for-TV movie.
Okay, so it had some violence in it and stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
I've got Trembling Colors in the chat saying that Mick Garris is the biggest hack and tries to milk his connection to other better directors to an obnoxious amount. Mick Garris is an interesting character. There's a very, very famous interview that gets included on a lot of Criterion discs and goes around the internet a lot. It's good, called Fear on Film, in which John Landis, Carpenter, and Cronenberg are interviewed. They're interviewed by Mick Garris. He was always sort of this kind of, if you know comics, Roy Thomas style hanger on to like other bigger talents, right?
Mm.
I would say his biggest success was the Stand miniseries, based on the Stephen King book for television in the early 90s. But his biggest movie is like Sleepwalkers, the Stephen King adaptation. Stephen King really liked him, and he got to do a lot of Stephen King stuff.
Critters,
but yeah, Critters 2, he's a staple on like Trailers from Hell on Joe Dante's website. But yeah, I don't have strong feelings about him either way. Maybe he's a hack. Maybe I'm a hack too. You guys will be able to find out when my movie's released. But your thoughts on the direction of the movie?
It's fine. I wish especially after hearing you talk about part 3, Perkins wanted to direct this one himself as well, but he was not allowed to by the studio. And I think we would have had a much different movie in retrospect had he been allowed to add a little bit of flavor. Because think about it. I mean, you haven't seen it, but when all the scenes with him as Norman, it's him on the telephone calling into a radio station. It's very flat. It's very boring. It's very uninteresting. The scenes otherwise are, they're okay. There's nothing. It's a very forgettable and boring exercise.
That's why the Bates Motel TV show didn't appeal to me either. And apparently I've just been informed that there was an 80s version of this.
There's an 80s TV pilot. Yes, I forgot about that. I have not seen it.
Know that. Okay.
Didn't get off the ground.
The origin of Norman Bates, I don't, please, guys. Like, I mean, here's the thing. Norman Bates is a great cinematic character. The reason that Psycho is a beloved movie is because it's a steel trap amazing thriller film, and not because the mythology of Norman Bates' psychosis is so interesting. It's not. Right? So that
And
we
also
need to
because of him.
pathologize Norman Bates for the end of time, I don't care.
It's also because of him, because of Anthony Perkins and the charm and the charisma that he brings to being this character that we should not like, we should not root for, we should not be in approval of, but we love him. We want him to succeed to a certain extent for a lot of these, especially the sequels where he is the true protagonist. I mean, the fact that he's absent from most of part 4 just as the narrator is a huge loss.
That's weird. Well, I'm glad I skipped it. I don't think I would have had a different opinion than you, because it seemed like we're pretty aligned on our thoughts, except for when it comes to the remake, which for me is just sort of a I admire the gumption behind it.
Oh, you know? I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
Gus Van Sant could have done anything after he did Good Will Hunting, and he was like, "I want to do a student film experiment with big stars."
And Trembling Colors makes the analogy to Texas Chainsaw Massacre for them doing Leatherface origins and all that. And it'd be like, imagine if we had Freddy Krueger, the origin story movie, where we see him as the janitor working in the boiler room. It'd be like, who cares?
The premise is interesting. Yeah.
The screenplay for 4 was actually written by Joseph Stefano. It's one of the, he didn't write that many movies, but he wrote the screenplay for this. I don't know. We didn't talk about Alma, Hitchcock's wife, Alma, who was a very important part of the script process for all of his films. And I know Stefano got credit for the screenplay for Psycho 1, but I wonder how much of that was written by him and how much was written by Hitchcock's wife doing rewrites. Because, you should watch the movie Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins. Yeah, you should. Definitely check that one out. It's a very easy breezy watch. It's very different than the nonfiction book that it's based on, which doesn't talk about Alma much at all. But she's like the focal point of that movie and her contributions to Hitchcock's films as being a strong associate. The screenplay for 4
is that real, or did they just beef up Helen Mirren's performance? I mean,
no, I think it's legit. It's legit. But the screenplay for 4, the cadence and the dialogue just feel very off and clunky, and kind of old-fashioned in the wrong ways. So I question what his true contributions and overall, importance of his role there. One more fun fact. It was filmed at Universal Studios Florida, part 4.
Oh, well.
One of the few films that ever was, yes. They had constructed a Psycho, Bates Motel and Mansion that were present at the park for many years. And they tore them down later in the 90s and built a Curious George playground over it.
Oh, that's too bad. Is it haunted by the spirit of Mother? Curious George.
I don't know. There was also the Hitchcock show at Universal where they would show you how they.
That would have been cool.
They made the Psycho shower scene. They would reenact it on stage, and they have the breakaway, rotating shower.
Really?
That then they would show you the shower in the front, and then they would flip it around and open the wall, and show you this is how he did the shower scene.
Oh, how perverse!
Yeah, that was great. And they would have an audience member come up on stage to be Mother.
Really?
Mm-hmm. You can look it up on YouTube. It still exists out there.
That's cool. I will.
Yeah. And then afterwards, you could go and see. You could interact with the Statue of Liberty torch from Saboteur, and
from Saboteur.
Yeah. You could hang from the Statue of Liberty torch, and with a blue screen, and then they had the merry-go-round from Strangers on a Train.
Really?
Oh yeah. I only remember this in passing. I remember going through it a couple times, but it was closed in 2003, and it replaced by Shrek.
Who the fuck has seen Saboteur since then? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, think about that's what's so cool is in the late 80s, early 90s, they were like, let's make an Alfred Hitchcock attraction at a major theme park.
But why wouldn't you have to hang off the Mount Rushmore?
Well, because he's build a torch.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
And then they closed it and put Shrek in there, which is a travesty.
Or you could have done the jump into San Francisco Bay Vertigo, right?
Yeah. Well, I had to use what they could work with, you know.
Or let me think. The Ponder the Redwood Forest with Jimmy Stewart, Vertigo. Okay.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, overall, the 3 out of 5. Oh, if you want to include 4.
Yeah, well, I would ask you though, like, you know, what possessed you like to make me watch these films? I mean, are these movies that are close to your heart? 2 and 3, and 1?
Not particularly, but one is definitely.
1 is great. 1 is a great movie. I really enjoyed exploring it again and studying it and being in the world. But you know what? I gotta say, like, it's not my favorite Hitchcock movie by a mile. I mean, it is a curiosity in his oeuvre, I would say, that ended up defining his career. But for me, I'm a North by Northwest, Rear Window, Rope, you know, Notorious guy, right?
Yeah, I'm very much a fan of the Cary Grant ones. Those are my favorites. So Suspicion,
Absolutely.
Notorious, North by Northwest.
Yes.
I'm also a sucker for Torn Curtain, like I said.
Yeah.
I confess. Oh, and Lifeboat. I love Lifeboat.
Lifeboat's great. I really like his early British stuff. So Foreign Correspondent was American, but it's a sort of a British style movie. And then the 38 Steps is tremendous.
39 Steps.
39 Steps. Sorry.
Yeah.
39 Steps. Sorry. And the Lady Vanishes.
Okay.
Those are terrific, man. You've seen those, right?
Yeah.
I was hoping to talk about those both. Go ahead.
Oh go ahead.
I was going to talk about the Lady Vanishes and the 39 Steps in the context of like part 2 of my movies that took us to war series, but nobody watched the first part, so I might just do them separately. Yeah.
Any thoughts on Marnie? I just watched that again for the first time in a while. Huh?
You know, Marnie is one of those sleeper movies that that was post Psycho, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Also,
that movie was supposed to be Grace Kelly. That was supposed to be
Grace Kelly. I think it works better with Tippi Hedren, to be honest. I know he wanted Grace Kelly, and Grace Kelly was too busy being Princess of Monaco to do it.
Yeah.
But I think it works better with Tippi Hedren. I think I don't believe that Grace Kelly would have a debilitating condition. Do you know what I'm saying?
No. I do. I think it would have been a totally different movie entirely. The problem with Marnie is that she's so unlikable for most of the movie that it makes it very hard for you to sympathize with her.
Well, and it's such
all the characters are unlikable. Marnie.
Dude, there's so much to talk about with Marnie. I've thought about doing a Marnie video because the themes of like feminism and masculinity are so combustible. Like the idea of Sean Connery like being so manly he forces her to be normal is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah, it's like snap out of it.
I'm going to stage something to make you snap out of it. I'm going to tame you.
Just to respond to the comment, I do like Marnie. I just don't think it's as great as anything else. I mean, I think I gave it 2.5 stars on Letterboxd, which might be unfair.
No, that's what the fuck. No, you're nuts. You're crazy. But you know what? There's also this idea of you're crazy. You're crazy. Like that's no. The stealing from the safe scene alone is 3 stars. Give me a break. Come on.
Okay.
No, I know your ratings are different than mine.
Yeah.
Like I give everything I like 3 stars. Everything gets 3 stars. Everything.
2.5 for me is I liked it, but I don't love it. You know what I mean?
2.5 for me is it's shit.
Like, no. So like Psycho on Letterboxd, I give like 5 rating.
I never give anything 5 stars. Never give anything 1.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to misrepresent my opinion on Marnie. I did enjoy it, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good. Even in his post Psycho output, you know, I would definitely rather watch Topaz, you know, any day of the week over Marnie.
I like the rear screen horse scenes, and
it's just such a downer though. Like, and then
it's a total downer. And
let me kill my horse. Let me do this. My life is miserable.
and
Why
also
doesn't my mother love me?
there's way too much explanatory. Let me go back to the house where the trauma happened, and Bruce Dern was a John for my mom, and it's like that I can see as being interesting in 1960. It's no longer that interesting or scintillating. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, Sean Connery, he would have been a terrific Hitchcock Technicolor protagonist, and it's cool to see him in that sort of James Bond mode in the kind of Technicolor realm before he became balding, mustachioed. You know, I just watched The Great Train Robbery recently, in which he's terrific, right? But you never get that Bond Connery era doing anything different. But Marnie, I enjoy. It's just overly Freudian. Yeah, it is. And it's like the only set piece is the robbing from the safe.
Yes. Where the cleaning lady is on the other side of the room and she's sneaking away.
Takes her heels off, and it's good. But The Birds is a movie that's never resonated with me at all.
Yeah, it's fine. I like it, but it's I used to think that people thought The Birds was his like biggest film or most famous.
Well, they do, because every time you want to get the box set, it's always got crows on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, right? Hitchcock,
which is odd.
It is.
Tippi Hedren herself is just not in the same league, in my opinion, as Grace Kelly or Kim Novak or
Kim Novak is not in the same league as Grace Kelly, or no, she's not. Or
so.
who am I thinking?
Eva Marie Saint.
No, Casablanca.
Ingrid Bergman.
Ingrid Bergman and Grace Kelly were his two great stars.
Okay.
Kim Novak, I think, is kind of bland.
I think it works for her to go. But.
Both her and Eva Marie Saint are far too icy for my taste.
What about Joan Fontaine in Suspicion?
Yeah, but Ingrid Bergman could have been in that too. I mean, she was a great foil for Cary Grant, and one of the most, but for me, Grace Kelly, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief, one of the most radiant beauties to ever exist on cinema. Like one of the most beautiful women of all time. I mean,
also, Karen Black, quite good in Family
She's
Plot.
good, but Karen Black is not. Come on, like, let's be real here. Like, come on, like Karen Black is cool. She made a lot of great movies, but Grace Kelly. Yeah, Trembling Colors. No one is in the same league as her. No.
Okay.
The scene when Scotty Ferguson in Rear Window. Not okay. What's his name in Rear Window? Not Scotty Ferguson. That's Vertigo. She wakes Jimmy Stewart up.
Oh, I don't remember.
Rear Window in her just terrific little black and dress with the tool and her gloves. It's like she's just unbelievable.
Oh, and Dial-M for Murder, right?
Yeah, which is her least effective role. Because what's his name? Georgia, the
Ray
from
Milland.
Last Weekend, and Ray Milland. Sorry, I was getting mixed up with George Saunders. But Ray Milland is so good in that movie that you want him to win. You know what I mean?
One of my all-time favorite actors.
Yeah,
love him.
He's the best.
Yes. These are the kind of people. It's like you wish that they just had read the dictionary and recorded their entire voice.
Yeah.
And make AI versions of their voice to exist nowadays.
Yes, and have you ever seen Foreign Correspondent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like George Sanders in that movie, terrific.
Oh yeah,
He's
George
so
Sanders
good.
in anything though. Come on,
He's so good. All About Eve, he's great. I mean, he's
the acerbic wit of George Sanders.
The acerbic wit, yes, very British, very posh, very I love it. But
everyone is a total monster in that movie, including him, who shows Eve that hey, you may think you're the biggest fish in the pond here, but you're not gonna treat me like that. And she gets her comeuppance from him.
Exactly.
Basically.
He's terrific. So Dial-M for Murder for me is a movie I really like, but also one that after the murder fails, totally loses steam.
No, I disagree.
Yes, it does, because I'm asked to like a very who's the male protagonist? The actor.
The good guy.
Lover. The good guy.
I don't remember. Let's see.
Yeah, he sucks. He's very similar to.
Doesn't matter though. It's all Bob Cummings.
Yeah, terrible.
No, Bob Cummings is not terrible.
No, he's bad, and he's very very similar to John Gavin. He's a total John Gavin.
No. Bob Cummings is totally much better than John Gavin.
Let me find you out, Ray Milland. I'm like, no, bitch. Hitchcock just fucked with me for an hour trying to get me on Ray Milland's side, and I was. And now that Grace Kelly evaded death, like I'm not, the better Frederick Knott script or the better movie is Wait Until Dark. Frederick
I have
Knott
not
was a
seen
playwright.
the Michael Douglas remake, which is, I believe, A Perfect Murder. That was the remake of Dial M for Murder.
I didn't know that.
Yes. There's an interesting article on I think on Wikipedia I was looking at that you can see like remakes of Hitchcock films, and there's some that are just like you wouldn't expect it. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
Michael Douglas, I'm trying to kill my wife.
On this article, I have to go back and rewatch it, but they list Mission Impossible 2 as a remake of Notorious.
That is dumb.
I agree.
Remember the part when Cary Grant got his mission and his glasses exploded while he was climbing Mount Everest or whatever?
I do remember a big hubbub when Disturbia came out. That people were like, "Oh,
yes,
it's Rear Window with Shia LaBeouf."
Yes, but by the way, when I was in high school, that was the movie to see because it was kind of scary, and it was PG-13, so we could go.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For all the little teeny boppers to go to.
What fucking remakes?
Huh?
I'm just looking at these remakes, and they're all kind of like a stretch.
Should we talk about like who is there a modern day Hitchcock? And if there is, of course, the one that comes to mind is M. Night Shyamalan, for instance. Would you say that's no? You don't think that's fair at all? No.
No, I don't.
A lot of times, people were comparing him to him back, at least during the initial era.
I know. I could see that.
And all that.
I could see that too, not just because he, but he's a writer-director. Hitchcock was not a writer-director.
Well, we're not comparing exactly.
That's very important.
100%. I think it's more an apt comparison.
Well, no, because one of the main reasons why everyone was like, "Oh, M. Night Shyamalan's like Hitchcock," because he's also widely known and can sell on his name, and you know what I mean. Like, right?
He appears in the movies too, so there's that.
Yeah, no, come on. Hitchcock was one of a kind. I mean, he was a one of a kind dude. He was very weird from a very particular time and place. Maybe we have to wait for M. Night to die before we hear about his foibles and hangups and problems and weird sexual fantasies and picadillos. But like, come on, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So Trembling Color says the closest to Hitchcock anyone ever got was De Palma. True. But he tried so hard for the role, it kind of eliminates him. I agree. Like De Palma worked so hard to be Hitchcockian that he ended up creating his own kind of style. And we also talked about De Palma earlier in this one, which I'm a huge De Palma fan. And like with De Palma, we were talking about the falling down the stairs scene. De Palma would do that kind of a thing to draw attention to himself. Hitchcock wasn't trying to do that. But like the very act of drawing attention to himself, I find rather stylish and fun. And I try to emulate that as well. So I draw a lot of inspiration from De Palma in making my own humble movie. And he's a favorite of mine for sure. But he is a Hitchcock acolyte. And he would say that himself, that he wasn't trying to be the next Hitchcock. What he was trying to do was he thought Hitchcock was so innovative and cool that everybody should be trying to rip him off. Mm-hmm. And that all he was doing was making movies in the style of Hitchcock, which more people should do. And he was like, Hitchcock created a whole new form, a whole new style. I'm a disciple of him, and I'm doing this.
Dressed to Kill. It's fantastic. Love it.
Great movie. Body Double. Great movie. That's a Rear Window remake. Mm-hmm. Body Double. Blowout.
Obsession.
Obsession is a Vertigo remake.
Yeah. And interestingly, there's a lot of Vertigo parallels in Dressed to Kill as well.
Yes, but Obsession much more so. Have you seen Obsession?
Okay. No.
It is almost as much. I mean, I would, if you want to do a double feature of Hitchcock remakes, watch Gus Van Sant Psycho and Obsession.
I'm not watching Gus Van Sant Psycho again.
Well,
for another 10 years at least.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like,
what's the point? what's the point of watching that again?
Okay, so Trembling Color says Blowout was more of a remake of Blow Up. I disagree. Have you seen Antonioni's Blow Up?
No.
I didn't talk about Blow Up in my Blowout review, and I probably should have. But Antonioni's Blowout shares themes from Blow Up, and De Palma has mentioned Blow Up when he talks about Blowout. But Blow Up to me is not as effective. I get why it would have been very cool at the time, but you know, oh, that's a great point from Matthew. Yeah, Cape Fear is an excellent movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, who Joe Don Baker very much plays an Arbogast role in that film. The remake with De Niro and Nick Nolte. But what do we got? Anything? Are we good?
I think we beat this dead horse enough. But yeah, I think this was a good topic and a good series to, take a look back at. Absolutely. I'm glad that you were able to watch them. That even though you'd never seen the sequels before.
Yeah, so, and I probably never would have. So thank you for opening me up to that world. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure. What is our next endeavor? We have a couple things on the docket.
I think I'll tell you guys. Did I freeze? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Either I'm frozen or you're frozen. I don't know.
I think I'm frozen because I'm frozen on my own television. You're still going though, so there must be some kind of issue with my camera.
I can hear you though.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. We have to get you on as a guest next time. So, this is me, just I'm just with life is just taking its toll. So, guys, I'm sorry if I haven't. Yeah, I haven't put out I haven't put out a video in a long time. I have 2 scripts that are done. I just need to record them and edit them for Michael Crichton's Coma and David Cronenberg's Videodrome. I'm working on my own feature film currently, and then our next stream is going to be Night Gallery, and you're going to walk me through this.
Okay, so that's the next one. Okay, that'll be fantastic. I gave you quite a laundry list of episodes.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to be the next one. My wife thanks you. She's going to have to sit through these at night. But
they're good.
I think we'll try to I think we'll try to sneak in, if we can, a 2024 summer wrap up where we talk about, I think we decided on the Bike Riders, Twisters, Wolverine, and Trap.
You're really going to make me sit through Deadpool and Wolverine? Really?
I know. I haven't seen it yet either.
I don't know if I can. I just don't know if I can.
I'm really not looking forward to it, especially after all the cameos have been spoiled. But Trembling Color says great appearance on Low Res's podcast. Yeah, thank you. I appeared on the Low Res Wonder Bread podcast to talk about Furiosa. So if you guys are a fan of his, check him out. It was a good show. So I think it's behind a paywall, but yeah.
It might be better instead of Deadpool. Like, are you going to see Alien Romulus?
I will see that.
Okay.
Look, we're trying to get viewers here. We're trying to get viewers in the house. We got to fucking see.
Do you know how many people are going to be turned off when I say how much I end up hating Deadpool?
What if you like it? What if you think it's good?
That chance. I mean, from everything that I've read, it looks just everything that I despise about modern superhero movies.
I'm with you. And that's the crazy thing too, is it's like this thing made $1 billion. How did they make $1 billion without me? I didn't see it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I have no interest. Zero.
I'm the guy that you're looking for. How'd you make $1 billion without me?
I would have been the guy 15 years ago, maybe, but nowadays, not so much.
Now we're grown men.
Don't really want to watch a movie where Deadpool eviscerates people while dancing to Madonna's "Like a Prayer."
That is not funny to me.
It's so ironic and funny.
Isn't that funny that he's killing people to a song that is ironic?
Yeah. So funny.
You're going to sit through it, and so am I.
Lame? Weren't those 20th Century Fox movies just so bad?
That's the joke. Blade. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Which wasn't even a Fox movie, but...
Okay.
Anyway, that would be the whole review, and people would be like, this guy sucks.
How am I froze?
I don't know.
All right.
Maybe turn your camera off and turn it back on.
You know what? There could be a Norman Bates walking up behind me right now to stab me, and you wouldn't even know it because I'm frozen. Yeah. Live stream.
Trap was quite good though. I did enjoy that. One of Shyamalan's better recent entries for sure.
The alternative title for Psycho, actually.
Really?
No,
did not know that.
That's a transvestite.
Did you just make that up?
A poor taste transvestite joke I made about, but
okay,
maybe the chat will understand.
Sure.
But all right, brother. Hey, it was great talking to you again.
Yes, of course. It's always a pleasure.
Always great to see you.
Yes, that is a perfect face for Deadpool. Yes, eyes closed.
That's what the people want to see. Here's what they want to see. They want us to hate it, and I'm going to go to it and probably like it, and then I'm going to.
And then I have to be in the position of like shitting on the movie and being the spoil sport.
I like the cameos.
So funny.
You know what was funny when they said "fuck"? That was hilarious.
Isn't it funny how Wolverine doesn't like him?
It's like the odd cop. It's like a buddy cop movie, but yeah.
But anyway, I gave you the list of Night Gallery episodes. I don't know if you can make it through all of those. If you need me to trim it down to say like which ones are like,
yeah, you sent me a list. I was like reading an Allen Ginsberg poem. It was like fucking like 30 stanzas of shit. I was like, how am I gonna watch all this shit?
Okay, first of all, not all of those are they're segments. So there's episodes with multiple segments in them. So I chose the ones that you can like cut out, like just go to that segment.
Well, they an hour or how long are they?
Depends. Some are like 15 minutes. Some are half an hour. None of them are longer than the longest one is they're tearing down Tim Riley's bar, which is like 40 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
Which is a great episode.
Okay. I'm excited.
But anyway, let me know.
That, and then we have a guest that we're going to do Giallo films with, I think, if we can get to it. But
yes,
I've got an early start.
A list of stuff to watch for that.
Yeah, I got an early start on Halloween for the Film Journal, so I'm thinking I'm going to do Videodrome and Salem's Lot, the Toby Hooper Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot would be fantastic. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I'm reading the book now too. So.
Oh, okay.
All right, everybody. It's been fun.
I'm going to plug my thing. Hopefully soon we'll have out the Chuck Norris Karate Commandos cartoon review, which we've been working on for quite a while. So since that got cut from our initial when we were chit-chatting before when no one was watching. So
I'm very excited for that, and everybody else should be too.
I hope so. All right. It's been fun. See you next time.
Been a good stream, brother. See ya.